Blog Talk Radio.
The 31-year-old man was taken to the hospital. No word so far on his condition. We're, of course, going to be following this story tonight on Fox 6 News at 9 and 10, and, of course, fox6now.com.
And our big story right now at 6 o'clock, rounding up doctors and putting them in jail. That is the goal in Milwaukee County.
The inmates need medical and psych care. Some say they're just not getting it. Our Myra Sanchuk reports the deadline to fix this problem is just 10 days away.
A lot of people in these jails are going on suicide watch. They're threatening, they're going nuts, because of the fact that nobody properly takes care of them.
Nick Renzel says he's been an inmate in the Milwaukee County Jail.
Dental care in the jail, all they do is pull your teeth.
Renzel says he needed psychiatric meds and was put in solitary confinement.
I spent 3 days in Ocean 2 with no care at all. It's the hole. It's the place where you go if you're in trouble.
He's not the only one. The Milwaukee County Jail has had no medical director for 2 years, no full-time psychiatric doctor in a year. A judge has ordered the sheriff and county to work together on the problem. The sheriff wants to hire a private organization to help. Some county supervisors want to keep the hiring local and internal. Tuesday, the sheriff criticized the plan to hire a St. Louis firm to search for doctors to work at the jail. Sheriff Clark said, quote, "This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. This will prolong the delay in filling these critical positions," end quote.
If things are as bad as people are saying, okay, then we, the county, are putting ourselves in a huge liability position.
County Supervisor Mark Borkowski says it's not as bad as some are saying. The ACLU disagrees.
The person who was on the floor, essentially shaking on the floor, and the nurses came and said, "Oh, just put him back in his bed and he'll be fine." I mean, things that are really beyond the pale. And we're really concerned about the dangerousness of the situation there, both on the psychiatric side and on the medical side.
Ladies and gentlemen of America, this is AJC Radio, where we seek to bring the message of justice all around the world. Tonight we continue Voices from Behind the Wall. Why is medical treatment being denied to inmates in prisons, in jails all across this nation, and people are dying and body bags are being filled up? Folks, we take off right now, Voices from Behind the Wall. Let's go. And there you have it. I'm Lamont Banks, along with Cliff Stewart, Dennis Merritt, William Williams, Samson Riddle. And I'll tell you what, this aims to be a good one, folks, as we continue the coverage and to be the voice for those who have now become voiceless behind the wall in prisons and jails all across this nation. And we're going to continue that tonight. The refusal of medical treatment. Folks are dying in our jails, in our prisons. And it's just unacceptable. And every person has the right to medical treatment. And this is, again, I believe, an act of punishment that these prisons and these correctional officers and wardens and everybody else involved here, again, we don't put them all in the same boat, but this is happening at an alarming rate. And we're going to deal with that issue tonight. And, Samson, as we get ready to go down this road, again, Voices from Behind the Wall, no medical treatment. As I was talking to you before we came on the air, prisons here in Colorado taking the diabetic diet meal off of the menu for inmates who are diabetic, and that's a death. That's definitely a death wish without question.
Absolutely. I mean, it just seems like they don't understand the gravity of their actions. When you're sitting there making a diabetic person, whether they be type 1 or type 2, eat the amount of sugar and carbs and stuff that are in the meals that they serve these inmates, I mean, they're putting them on a death sentence, whether it be right away or long term. Like they're going to kill them.
No, absolutely right. And I actually got that information from a friend of mine who is now out of prison and had actually told me what had happened prior to him leaving. And that was something that comes from the Department of Corrections right here in Colorado. Something needs to be done about that. Dennis, your thoughts as we go down this road tonight? I agree. Something definitely needs to be done. I mean, these are not animals. Even animals. Let me take it back. I don't even want to start off with animals because we're going to make sure they get they get nutritious food to make sure that they survive. But again, here we go taking prisoners and saying they're nobody, not worth anything. But when you talk about diabetes and you talk about all these different things that people deal with just from being a human, I mean, it's a basic right to provide someone with a proper nutritious meal. And for that not to be taking place in prison, we got a problem and we got to get it fixed.
Oh, absolutely right. Cliff, your thoughts is, you know what? Look, and then the point, Dennis, you made is true. They're going to get, if an animal gets sick, they're going to get veterinarian care.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately. And we'll have 24-hour emergency care veterinarians who make it available that those pets are, and I have no problem against that. Let me be clear. I love dogs and I love animals, period. But do we not hold human life to any value at all as we address this issue? Cliff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad situation when you see people who abuse animals. You can get jail time for abusing an animal. You can get jail time if you have for neglecting an animal. And yet our system that's set in place does not, do anything to hamper people's health getting worse. I mean, I think back to what Sheriff Arpaio down in Arizona said that, when he was talking about feeding his dogs and saying, oh, no, my dog's lunch costs more than an inmate meal, and it'll always be that way. And he said it with pride, the dog is worth much more than one of these inmates. His meal costs about, $5, and the inmate's meal costs less than $2. Those are the type of things that, as a culture, and you look at where he's at in Arizona, in Maricopa County, where the culture there, they continue to vote him in. And so the people there are saying, yes, we love the way that you're treating inmates. We love the way that you're running the jails. We're fine with the fact that a dog gets a meal that's more valuable than human. And in essence, saying we're fine with the fact that a dog's life is more valuable than a human. So we have to change that culture. We have to, cry out, raise our voices, vote, do whatever we can to say these type of things are not tolerated. From giving inmates these meals that, when the package that everybody's eating out of says not for human consumption, there's something wrong with the rules or the people that are set in place to ensure the rules are followed on what these inmates are being fed and how they're being treated as far as their medical health. It's there's really no word to say for it.
No, it's absolutely unacceptable, totally ridiculous. But we're going to address these issues. A lot of people, again, how many people do not know that their loved ones are being treated this way, that their, loved ones, diabetes is a very serious issue. That's just one issue that continues just to be an issue. And you don't understand, the more we unravel voices from behind the wall, the more we are shocked that this is going on because no one is talking about it until now. And AJC Radio will continue to be the voice for those who have really become voiceless. And we're going to do our very best to bring justice to these folks and hopefully institute some change here around the nation. Feel free, folks, to call in to 646-200-0628, 646-200-0628 as we continue to deal with these issues that are very, very important. So I'll tell you what, folks, this is something that you need to tell your neighbors about, you need to tell everybody about, because I'll tell you what right now, until we become outraged with what's going on, when people are dying 25 years old, and we talked the other night about the juveniles, which we'll be picking that back up on Tuesday, the injustice that juveniles and youngsters are suffering in juvenile detention centers across this country, until we become outraged that our kids are dying, our relatives, our family, our friends are dying as a result of just a no-care attitude about the folks that are behind the wall of these prisons and in these county jails. It's just something we have to deal with. On the other side of the break, folks, we're coming back. Voices from behind the wall, medical care, medical treatment denied at an alarming rate. We'll deal with it on the other side of this break. This is AJC Radio. We'll be right back. For a kid whose mom or dad is in prison, life is tough. Now add a wrongful conviction to that. Life just got a little bit tougher. Trying to explain to friends why mom or dad is not at the school play or at the ball game is something that no kid should ever be faced with. Especially if mom or dad is innocent. Ladies and gentlemen, get involved today to stop the epidemic of wrongful convictions. By remembering a Just Cause with a monthly, annual, or one-time donation, you can help in the fight against wrongful convictions. Call a Just Cause today. 1-855-529-4252. We seek justice for the children as they go to bed at night and mom's not there. Dad's not in the other room to make them feel safe. Not because dad or mom did anything wrong, because justice could not be found. Join us for the children, for they truly are our future.
History is important because it shows where you're coming from and where you're going. Type 2 diabetes is something that runs in my family, which means I'm at risk. In fact, 1 in 3 American adults are at risk for developing type 2 diabetes. And knowing this, if I do nothing, that family history becomes my family's future. And my family is too important to me for that. Take the risk factor assessment today at AskScreenNo.com.
How often does our justice system get it wrong, convicting innocent people of crimes they did not commit? A new project by the University of Michigan Law School and the Center for Wrongful Convictions at Northwestern University School of Law tries to answer that question. In the last 23 years, more than 2,000 people have been convicted of serious crimes and later exonerated, according to the National Registry of Exonerations. By far, the largest segment was almost 1,200 defendants falsely convicted because of large-scale patterns of police corruption, generally in drug and gun cases. Of the remaining 873 defendants exonerated, nearly half were wrongly convicted of murder, and of that group, 101 were sentenced to death. On average, it took more than 11 years for a conviction to be set aside. Why does the justice system get it wrong? In homicides, the biggest problem is perjury and false accusation, most often by supposed eyewitnesses. False convictions in adult rape cases are primarily based on mistakes by eyewitnesses, while false convictions in child sex abuse cases are often for fabricated crimes that never occurred. 2,000 exonerations may seem small in a nation with more than 2.3 million people behind bars, but there are far more false convictions than the report contains. Most false convictions are never formally challenged, and those convictions that are successfully overturned receive little or no attention from the media, according to the report's authors.
So most people don't understand the importance of exercising and eating right. Most people think it's about getting super buff or eating grass to keep that perfect bod, but to those who believe that are wrong. Exercising regularly and getting the right balance of nutritious food leads to a common diagnosis known as healthy. Now, healthy may sound mainstream and boring, but it's real. It improves your immune system to prevent sickness, boosts self-confidence and controls body weight, gives you energy, and improves your overall happiness. So next time you think that's not bad, think again and be the best you can be.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, They each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to AJC Radio, where we bring the message of justice all around the world. Again, tonight is no exception as we deal with voices from behind the wall, the lack and the denial of medical treatment to inmates across this nation. And that's in prisons, jails, detention centers, juvenile detention centers as well. We're going to touch on that a little bit on next Tuesday. But tonight we deal with the horrific stories of no medical care, where folks are dying in cells, they are sick and observed, and nothing is being done about it. Joining us here at the bottom of the hour will be Tasha Osborn. She's founder and CEO of Inmates Lives Matter of Georgia. She's going to give her perspective on this as well, and we look forward to hearing her thoughts on this issue. I can tell you right now, folks, this is something that you should be gravely concerned about. Because I'll tell you right now, just imagine if that is your mother, your father, sister, brother in custody who is begging for help, and it's not being supplied, it's not being given to them, and they are suffering and hurting. That, my friend, is a major problem. We're going to deal with those issues tonight. And right now we're going to play one clip. It's part one of this clip. It is a tragedy what happened to this man in a county jail who ultimately lost his life. Let's see what it has to say.
Jed Hawk Myers was 34 years old when he died shortly after midnight on May 28, 2015 at the Yamhill County Jail. Myers' death could have been prevented. He was assaulted in his cell, E28, at 7:08 p.m. on May 27th by two other inmates. Someone used the cell intercom to call for help, and at 7:25, Deputy Intern Colleen McNamara and Deputy Kiara Downs came up the stairs to the second level of E Block. They made their way along the upper tier to E28, where they found Myers.
As we went to walk into the cell, Myers stepped out of the cell and walked towards me and was incoherent because I kept telling him to stop walking towards me. He kept walking towards me. I said it 3 times until I finally stopped him in his place. He was sweaty and panting, and he said his chest hurt. And I said, where does it hurt? And he touched his stomach. And so I asked again, what hurts? And he said, it's chest. And I asked again because, to me, this is your chest and this is your stomach. And he put his hand on the side of his stomach. I was trying to figure out if he was coherent to where the pain was coming from.
McNamara and Downs entered Myers' cell. McNamara described Myers as having a dislocated shoulder.
At that point, Myers took off his shirt, and I could tell that his shoulder, what I observed to be, was dislocated. There was something protruding towards the front, and the shoulder did not look like a normal shoulder. I observed a sore on the front and back of his shoulders, what I would call an open sore. It wasn't bleeding, but it was shiny. You could tell that it was open. It looked relatively fresh. I didn't see any scabbing, but it was not bleeding.
McNamara, Downs, and 2 other deputies escorted Myers from E28 to a cell in the med unit. Inmates along the way noticed Myers was in pain.
He had to stop, and he was holding his side, and he had to lean up against the wall. And they were like, can you sit down? And he was like, oh, it hurt, I'm in pain. He was screaming. It looked like he cracked a rib and something punched him or something like that.
I was sitting on the stairs and I just heard a guy talking about pain. He looked pretty pale. And he ran into the door as he was walking out, kind of stumbling.
At 7:31 p.m., Myers arrived at Med Cell B. Deputies continued to examine him. Deputy Downs noted the injury to Myers' shoulder.
He's sitting down, he's still holding his chest. He keeps moving his shoulder, so, there was a big bump, but I couldn't tell what kind of injury it was.
Myers appeared to be bothered by his shoulder and appeared to be wincing with pain. As Deputy Roger Swift got Myers a glass of water, Deputy Downs noticed a bump on the side of Myers' head and pointed it out to Swift.
And I also noticed a contusion on his head, on his right side, because that's on the side I was standing. A red bump on the side of his head, just above the ear.
Myers continued to show signs of pain and disorientation, lying down, rolling back and forth, and then sitting back up. Medical technician Kevin Thurman came to the cell to examine Myers.
Kind of agitated, but not like I'm going to fight you agitated, just unsettling, just couldn't sit still. I'm trying to just say, you need to stop screaming, what's going on? And I put our pulse ox on his finger, and his heart rate was 130, and he was, his oxygen level was 99%. And I tried probably 5 or 6 times to get a blood pressure on him, and he wouldn't sit. I couldn't even get him to sit still. He would flex or move, and so the machine kept coming up with errors. So I never got a blood pressure on him.
At about 7:37 p.m., Thurman gave up on getting a blood pressure reading. Myers appeared to be complaining about his side and his shoulder. MedTech Thurman wondered about Myers sweating.
The thing that stuck out is that he was rapid heart rate and sweaty, and you can't fake being sweaty. But then he's sweaty and tachycardic, so I'm like, something's going on.
Despite Thurman's concerns, he left the cell at 7:38 and did not return. His shift ended at 10. Thurman was the only medically trained staff member to examine Myers in the hours before his death. Myers continued to grimace and squirm. Sweat was evident on his upper body. Deputies Tamara Hart and Roger Swift were the last 2 deputies in Myers' cell while he was alive. At 7:43, Swift left, and then a few seconds later, Hart left. Myers was left alone in his cell. He appeared to be crying out. Then he got up and went to the door, where it appeared he pushed the intercom button for help. The intercom for Med Cell B is to the left of the door. Myers sat back down. He continued to yell or scream, sometimes clutching his side. He lay back down, but didn't look comfortable. He was sweating and calling out. It looked like he might have yelled, "Help me." Nearby in Med Cell E, inmate Thomas O'Donnell reported he could hear Myers screaming. Oh, he sat there and screamed. He kept screaming, "Help me, help me." He screamed. He screamed, he screamed, he screamed. To the point, like I said, I got up there and pushed the button. Like I said, he just kept screaming. I didn't understand why they didn't take him to the hospital. At 7:45, Myers was back at the intercom. He made several trips to the door and the intercom that night. None of the calls were answered. Deputy Hart explained the intercom would be deactivated for an inmate who was judged to be overly needy.
We have an ability to disable an intercom in our holding cells, in our medical cells, and generally they will be disabled because we will have somebody in there that is just very needy, and they're always on it. So between, them just pushing it because they're, upset about something, they're not getting their way or their attention. And so in that instance, we'll put their cell up on the screen just to kind of monitor them.
Myers' cell could be monitored in the jail control room on a 1/9 section of a large screen TV. Deputies monitoring his cell would have seen Myers yelling and writhing on his bed. His side appeared to be bothering him. He looked sweaty. He appeared to be in pain. At 7:48, he was back to the door and the intercom. Another call for help. He returned to the door at 7:50. Back at the bed, he sat down, clutching his stomach, in obvious pain. A couple of minutes later, he rolled to the side and onto the floor of his cell. He looked like he was trying to get comfortable, one position after another to see what worked. Again, it looked like he was saying, "Help me." He returned to the door and the intercom at 8:03. One more attempt to get someone's attention. Deputies began a series of security look-ins on Myers. Deputy Eric Klauser performed a check at 8:07. At that point, Myers was back lying on his bed. Deputy McNamara was back for another security check at 8:12. Again, Myers was lying on his bed. 2 minutes later, Myers returned to the door to push the intercom buzzer. To the door again at 8:20. A try for the intercom again at 8:27. At 8:30, he fell off his bunk and sprawled on the floor. After a short while, with some effort, he struggled to get up at 8:31 and made another attempt at the buzzer. At 8:38, Myers' cell was falling into disarray. It looked like he was becoming more disoriented. He made 2 more attempts at the door to get help at this time. Myers tried the door and the intercom again at 8:53. He sat back down and leaned against the wall. At 8:54, Myers got up to urinate in the toilet. When he was done and moved away, the previously clear water in the toilet was red. Blood in Myers' urine had turned the toilet water red.
There you have it, folks. And we have part 2 of that story. This is what blows my mind. The lady sitting in the booth who made the statement, which is the control center, said we have the ability to disable the intercom because the people sometimes are needy. She should be charged with first-degree murder. Whoever disabled that call, not that they would have answered anyway, 19 times he pressed that button for help because he was dying, and they ignored it. How do you explain that? Dennis?
It's very difficult to explain. I could not explain it because, first of all, not only do they have the means, the intercom itself, so what if it was shut off? There still should have been monitoring the cameras, and they should have seen that he constantly was trying to get help. So either way you look at it, there's no explanation. There's no excuse for what happened in that prison.
The problem here is the reason that intercom is in that cell because you are locked in there with another individual in most cases. In that case, you're locked in there by yourself. So help me understand, what logic do you have to disable a panic button, an intercom system in that cell? What if that guy's getting ready to kill himself? And he changes his mind, but he can't breathe, or whatever the case is. This is absolutely outrageous. Outrageous. Well, they seem needy. That's your job. They don't matter.
And how does the medical examiner, the only one on staff, he examines a man who, on one hand, the medical examiner's talking out of both sides of his mouth. He's saying, well, he's acting erratic. He's aggravated. I couldn't get a blood pressure because he wouldn't be still. Then he starts saying, well, but then he's sweating. You can't fake sweating. You can't fake an elevated pulse of 150 pulse. That is running on a treadmill when your pulse is that high. So you, with your medical training, you know he cannot fake these things, and yet you leave and never come back, knowing something is wrong with this man. He has an elevated pulse. He's sweating profusely. Something's wrong, but I'm going home for the night. I'm not going to even recommend that he goes to the hospital. Why? Because I'm a little bit perturbed that he won't let me take his blood pressure. Obviously, this man is disoriented. Whatever is going on, whether he's having a heart attack, whether he's got obviously with blood in his urine, he's got some blood poisoning going on. That basically his organs are failing. And they're basically poisoning his body. So he's disoriented, and you have the medical the person who's there who supposedly took the Hippocratic oath that I will do no harm and I will ensure that I'll do everything that I can to protect life. As far as if somebody is sick, he leaves for the night. Never recommends, hey, why don't you take him to the hospital, get some X-rays. This man has holes in his shoulder that they said are not healed, but they're not bleeding. He's got a contusion on his head, but nobody says, let's get this man to the hospital to see what's going on. They just leave him in the cell.
William,
The thing that really bothered me about that is, to your point, okay, so they deactivate the intercom system, and they said it was a one-night screen that they were monitoring the cell. Even if you're monitoring it, you could see in it. That doesn't mean that you'll be able to recognize or see if that person's in distress. That's why the intercom's there. That's why there's some kind of audio capability there. If the person is wincing or gasping for air or something along those lines, so they can audibly hear that this person's in distress, because they may not see this on a one-night screen. You're talking about, so you're looking at 9 different screens, picture in picture, and you've got this. There's no telling how big this is.
Call it what it is. They didn't care.
No, and to Cliff's point, I like the way they framed that this was a medical technician. But, you really got to question, this kind of person. He was one person on there, and so it's again, we've talked about this. This is this same behavior that the guards have, this guy had, is evident. And so it's like, okay, I've been medically trained, but I still don't care about these inmates.
Well, the issue is, if you had the intercom off, which you should be locked up because you did it.
That's true.
You saw the man go to the door 19 times. And will probably just sit back with your little packed lunch, sit back, we don't care, we're not concerned about this. That's the culture. This guy didn't matter. And you killed him.
And then, that's what's truly disgusting there, because, he made several attempts to the point of where he wore himself out. He sprawled out on the floor, managed to crawl back up, and still attempt to basically trying to save his own life. Now, they say they could have disabled the buzzer or whatever, but it's like, if they would have done that, they still had, it's documented. They said they noticed that the water changed color. The water changed color. They noticed that. And this guy, this medical examiner, whose shift didn't until 10 p.m., did absolutely nothing.
And we're going to hear part 2 again that talks about, you'd be surprised of the explanation the officer gave what was in the toilet that was red.
Kool-Aid in his cell.
This was some type of punch. He's had 3 sack lunches, perhaps. Have you lost your mind?
Yeah, a juice box is not going to turn the toilet red so that you can see that on a monitor.
And if you
there's a difference with juice in the toilet and blood.
And if you see the video, it is dark ruby red. And he said the flavors was raspberry. Wow. That was his explanation. We'll deal with that when we hear that on this side of the break. Right now, we are honored to have joining us to get in on this conversation, Tasha Osborn, founder and CEO of Inmates Lives Matter of Georgia. And I want to hear her perspective on this. We're honored to have her to chime in this conversation. Tasha, are you with us?
I'm here. Thank you. Thank you for such a great introduction. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Tasha. And thank you for joining us tonight. And I don't know how much of this you've heard already. I'm going to give you the floor to introduce yourself. We're talking tonight primarily about the refusal of medical treatment in our prisons as part of our series, Voices from Behind the Wall. And I know you're going to be joining us as well as down the road doing this series to discuss some other things that you have become very formidable at. So we're going to definitely have an opportunity to talk to you again. But right now, let me get your thoughts and tell the folks about your foundation, not the foundation, excuse me, about your organization, Inmates Lives Matter, as we deal with this issue of abuse behind the wall.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm Tasha Osborn. I'm the CEO of Inmates Lives Matter of Georgia, Inc. We're pretty new. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been an advocate for a really long time. First of all, can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. I've been doing this for a long time. I came to Georgia about 11 years ago, and I came to teach school, but I ended up working with inmates, and I fell in love with it, and it never left me. So I decided to start my own. And what they go through on a daily basis, you can't even put it into words. The abuse, the torment, the torture, the enslavement, what they deal with on a daily basis. Don't get me wrong. If you commit a crime, quite naturally you do need to serve your sentence and you're going to be punished. However, you're still a human. And a lot of what they go through is just not called for. And that's why we're here to fight for policy change inside the walls also, when they get out, let's get your job ready, let's get your family job ready, so that you are not tempted to go do the things that you used to do to go back behind the wall. So we don't want that as well. But as far as medical, can I start on medical?
Yeah, please.
Can I begin on medical? Okay.
That's our focus. Absolutely.
I've heard a lot of stories, so many. One in particular, a friend of mine, and she texted me today, they're going to finally take him to inspect his colon or whatever. When I tell you she's for 2 years been begging these people to take him to Augusta Medical Prison to just check, just look. It's been almost 2 years, and they finally said, okay, we're going to do it. And they still haven't even given her a specific date. So this is what they deal with on a basis. Out here we can just run to urgent care or the emergency room, but in there they have to put in a form and just hope that someone, responds. So that's pretty. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that if it's a life and death situation, they're not going to respond. But for the most part, there always seems to be a delay on the response in medical. And that's just been my experience since I've started this. And it's just not fair.
No, and you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you now, from what we're finding, this is happening in an alarming rate that people, and I like the name of your organization, Inmates' Lives Matter. What we're finding with the Voices Behind the Wall series that we're doing indefinitely is that these folks are suffering in inhumane ways. Life and death situations are going ignored. And I don't know if you heard part one of the story about Mr. Myers, the guy that rang his intercom button, pressed that button 19 times, begging somebody to help him because he was dying slowly in his cell. And they ignored him. They ignored him. And right now, really quick, Tasha, I want to play the conclusion of that so we can move on. But I want you to hear the part two of what happened to this man. I'm going to get your perspective on it on the other side of this clip. Let's play it.
At 9:18, Deputy Downs was on the rounds for the security check and peeked in the door window of Med Cell B. She apparently saw the blood in the toilet because she stood at the door window for several seconds, staring into the cell. She was about to leave the medical cell area when she doubled back to look in the cell again. She told Sergeant Woody Little, the jail commander, about what she had seen, and he suggested the red color was Kool-Aid.
It was very watery, like it was water, but it was red, and so that was like, that's kind of odd to me, and I asked the sergeant what we have on the food that's red, and he said Kool-Aid, because the juice pack was Kool-Aid. It was like raspberry flavored, or something red flavored.
Sergeant Little explained what led to his opinion that the red color was caused by some kind of food product.
Well, let's see, they had 3 sack lunches today, or sack meals, so grape jelly would have been in probably at least one of them. We also have fruit punch and God knows what else off the commissary truck that they have access to, so there's plenty of things.
Little said he wished Myers would have gone to the door and used the intercom to tell someone he was in distress.
I watched the video, I see Jay get up, I see him go to the toilet, and I see that the water's red when he leaves. He's standing. All he has to do is walk over and push a button on the wall.
Of course, Myers had pushed the intercom button several times, and no one came to his aid. At 9:37, he was moving around on his bunk and fell off onto the floor. A few minutes later, at 9:41, he fell off again. The next round of security checks was at 10:03, and Deputy Klauser was the one making the rounds. If Klauser hadn't already seen the blood in the toilet from monitoring in the control room, he would have seen it on his look-in. Klauser explained from his observations, he thought Myers was on drugs.
When you see people come in on a constant basis, I mean, people on drugs have, erratic movement and seeing weird stuff and crawling around. And, depends on the drug or the time lapse that it's been on, or just like an alcohol detox. They do a lot of hallucinating, seeing things crawling around.
At 10:43, it appeared Myers struggled to get something to drink from the sink in his cell. The next round of security checks was performed by Sergeant Little, When Little reached Myers' cell door, he spent a few seconds looking in. Something he saw in Myers' cell caused him to turn back and take another look. At that time, Myers appeared to be resting on his bed. The blood in the toilet was still easily seen. At 11:20, Myers was lying on the floor. He struggled to get up and made his way to the door. He was still trying to get the attention of someone who would either hear the intercom or see him go to the door on the security video. When he left the door, it looked like he fell to the floor and in the process hit the toilet. At 11:27, Myers made another trip to the door and the intercom. When he left the door, he stood by the toilet. He presumably flushed the toilet this time because when he stepped away, the toilet bowl water was clear. The blood had been visible for about 2.5 hours. In all, Myers made 19 trips to the door to push the button for help. From 11:31 to shortly after midnight, Myers made his final 5 trips to the door. Each time he went to the door to try and reach someone on the intercom. Myers had to struggle to get up for his final trip to the door at 12:06. All of his trips to the door were ignored. Deputies who saw him on the monitor going to the intercom to ask for help also ignored him. Deputy Dwayne McCommons was on duty for security checks at 12:11. He quickly glanced in Myers' cell. Myers was resting on the floor at the end of his bunk. Myers was apparently becoming weaker and weaker. He tried to get up at 12:19 and fell to the ground. He didn't look good. Deputy Klauser was monitoring Myers' cell from the control room at 12:24.
At one point, he propped himself up on the toilet, sat there, and he got up, kind of stood up, wobbled, and then slowly he got to the bunk at the edge, and he kind of leaned into it, and then he kind of fell against the wall, but real slow and controlled, and then slid down that, and then kind of rolled onto the floor there.
At 12:33, Myers was propped up in a corner, and his head suddenly slumped forward. He never raised his head again. Apparently, the standard for an injured inmate to get help was to stop breathing. At 12:50, Deputy McCommons noticed that Myers wasn't moving and decided he should go up to the cell and check on him.
I commented, I said, he doesn't really look right. And Klauser and I was kind of checking him out, we were both looking. And I was getting ready to get up, and Klauser commented, maybe we should go check on him. So I got up and immediately went and checked on him.
Finally, at 12:52, early on the morning of Thursday, May 28, 2015, a deputy entered Myers' cell. After all Myers' attempts to raise someone on the intercom, and after all his calls for help, it was too late. Deputy McCommons described what he found.
I checked his pulse on his wrist and then reached up and did a check for his carotid artery, and I could feel no pulse. His skin felt cold and clammy.
Deputies Swift and Hart joined McCommons. They did what they could, but Myers was dead. Time of death was given at 1:15 a.m., but the security video showed he had stopped breathing about a half hour before that. The autopsy showed Jed Myers had a lacerated kidney. He had suffered massive internal bleeding. He had a broken rib. His right clavicle was broken. He also suffered an injury to the right side of his head and brain damage. The injuries stemmed from the assault Myers suffered shortly after 7 p.m. the day before. But his death was caused by the decisions made by the jail staff working under the policies and practices of Yamhill County. A well-equipped examination room is in the jail, but the records of Myers' death show no discussion of its possible use, and no one called for an ambulance. Myers' loved ones know that their son, nephew, and brother died alone in a cell at the county jail. Myers left behind a daughter, Lacey, who was 3 at the time of her father's death. The family agrees Myers was a good parent, a loving father. Jed Myers was 34 years old when he died inside the Yamhill County Jail.
Senseless death. And who will be held accountable? Every excuse in the book being used to excuse away the failure to act by that county jail and its staff. And the medical facility that I saw when I was getting this clip together, everything you could possibly need in that room to save a life is in that room. And he suffered these injuries at 7:25 the day before. An entire day, you did nothing. And in most protocols, in a fight or anything like that, the inmates are taken to medical immediately. That is the protocol that is supposed to be in place. And Tasha, thanks for bearing with us on that clip. Give me your thoughts on this one.
Well, the excuses that are made, it's typical. Unfortunately, that's typical because now they're trying to protect themselves. Now they're afraid. So now everything, they're going to defend it, come up with things to justify it. And there's no way in the world you can justify this man's death. Dying alone, trying to get your attention, and you did nothing. But of course, they have their own codes back there behind those walls to protect each other, to protect themselves. And they're going to come up with every excuse in the book. And that is so typical and very unfortunate. And it's just too common. It's too common. Cases like his, unfortunately, have happened since I began this process. This journey, I should say. And just inmates in particular just crying out for help. And sometimes they're crying wolf, to get attention. We get it. But you can't assume. You don't know if he's hurt or not. Just make sure. And if he's lying, then write him up. Do what you have to do, but you can't assume that he's not telling the truth. And that happens way too often. Way, way too often. In Georgia, it's a typical protocol. They're supposed to respond immediately. If they want medical or go to the doctor or get something checked out, they have to put in a paper. A lot of times they get ignored. A lot of times they're waiting weeks for things like getting a tooth pulled or pain or medications refilled, things of that nature. And that should not happen. And then when things like that happen, then everyone has an excuse. There's no way. Everybody that was involved in that should be fired. They should be gone, but they're not going to be. And
they should be not only fired, but brought up on charges. And the insane thing about this whole story is who was charged in the death? The other two inmates that he got in a fight with. They got charged with him. And the story that they tell, in the Yam Hill Valley News Register there in Georgia is how they got into this fight. Now, they say nothing about this entire clip in this real news story. They say they got in a fight sometime Wednesday, and on Thursday morning, a deputy that was manning the medical booth saw that he had slumped over. They don't tell the rest of the action that he, was tried to ask for help hitting the intercom button 19 times over a 4-hour period. They say nothing about that. All they say is that about 1 o'clock, 911 was called, and the deputy said he noticed something was wrong. And they're trying to blame it on these other two men when the staff that was there, they're the ones that did not provide any medical help for this man, and especially that medical examiner. He should have his medical license, if he even has one, taken away, and he should be brought up on charges with the rest of the jail staff there, because this is ridiculous. There was no reason for this man to die. You have a lacerated kidney. They put you in the hospital, put you on an antibiotic, give you some medical attention. You have a broken rib and a dislocated shoulder. Those are things that can easily be fixed. Though all those issues, those are not things that typically kill people. Those are things that people can go to the hospital for. They can get treatment, and in a week or two, they're back up to normal. But instead, this staff at this jail totally disregarded this man's plea for help. And here you have a man who died a horrific, lonely death, pain all the way to the end. And they finally, after he's dead, 30 minutes after he stops moving, say, oh, well, looks like something might be wrong with him. Maybe we should go check him out, after there was blood in the toilet for 2 hours.
Yep. Samson?
Yeah, I'm just echoing what Cliff was saying. How it's ridiculous. The very first set of officers that even went to get him out of his cell, she said that she noticed a bump on his head, a red one, over his right ear. Now, I don't know about anybody else who's even seen a medical show or anything. A head injury requires immediate medical attention, no matter where you're at. But not only that, now he talks about the wounds on his shoulders, and then you come to find out, he shattered his collarbone, he's got broken ribs, he's got all these internal bleeding and everything like that going on, and they want to blame, grape jelly or some type of fruit drink from the cafeteria as to why the water in the toilet's red when they can do, what any common sense individual would do and walk in there and look.
No, absolutely right. Tasha, we're going to come back. You got time to stay with us?
Yes, I do.
All right, we're going to come back. We're talking about a tragedy. Amanda Hogan, I'm going to share that story with you here on the other side of this break. This is AJC Radio, Voices from Behind the Wall. Medical treatment denied to inmates across this nation as the body bags continue to pile up. We'll be right back. This is AJC Radio.
Do you know anyone who's been sent to prison who's innocent? The United States is experiencing record numbers of exonerations in cases where people were wrongfully convicted of crimes they did not commit. If you believe that no one should be sent to prison for crimes they didn't commit, there is something that you can do today. By remembering a just cause with a monthly, annual, or one-time donation, you can help in the fight against wrongful convictions. Call a just cause at 855-529-4252 or visit a-justcause.com and click the donate button. A Just Cause is a 501c3. Wrongful convictions are wrong. Let's be the voice of those who can't speak from behind the wall.
Say goodbye to affordability and say hello to losing control. Discover Price Gougasol, the latest outrageously expensive drug from Big Pharma. It's impossible to afford and reverses the ability to pay other bills. Because drug companies raise prices to pay for commercials like this one, side effects may include overdrawn bank accounts, bad credit scores, higher healthcare costs, children who don't get Christmas presents, and in some cases, the need to stop taking your medicine. If you experience any of these side effects, contact your financial advisor right away. Out-of-control drug costs are no joke. Yet 9 of the 10 biggest pharma companies spend more on advertising than research and development. Let's solve the cost crisis now. Visit csrxp.org.
Look, right now, while you're looking at this on your screen in your hand or on your computer, there's somebody just like you who's sitting in a prison cell. And they didn't do much more than you did, some crazy weekend. You didn't get caught. They got caught. And they can never get uncaught. The United States of America is now the #1 incarcerator of human beings in the world, in the history of the world. We have about 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prisoners. We have more people locked up than China. China, who has 1 billion people, they got fewer prisoners than we do. A lot of times people say, well, if you don't want to do the time, don't do the crime. Really? Have you ever committed a crime? You got people who are doing more drugs on college campuses, in yacht clubs, country clubs. We all know that's going on, but the SWAT team never shows up there. The SWAT team shows up in the housing projects where you got poorer people doing fewer drugs, and those people go to prison. But think about it. What if one of the times when you were breaking the law, when you had something illegal in your pocket, in your car, at your party, the police had kicked in those doors? Would you want to be known for the rest of your life based on what happened that night? That is what is happening to millions of people. If rich folks' kids get in trouble, they go to rehab. Poor folks' kids get in trouble, they go to prison. And you spend $100,000 per year per kid to lock a kid up. when you could have spent a fraction of that and turned them into a NASA scientist, turned them into a fashion icon. When people come home from prison, they're not given the opportunity to start over. You leave a physical prison and you go into a social prison where you can't get a job, you can't get a student loan, you can't rent an apartment. How are people supposed to start over? And what happens to neighborhoods when you take a disproportionate number of people out for minor offenses and you send them back home with no hope and no opportunity? There are no more excuses to have this horrible system continue when there is now finally bipartisan agreement that it is a tragedy to do this. Not only do you have President Obama and the Democrats, you now actually have people like Paul Ryan, Koch Industries, Newt Gingrich, all saying the same thing. We are locking up too many people. We're wasting too much money. We're wasting too much genius in America, and it's time to do something.
Ladies and gentlemen of America, this is AJC Radio, where we are talking tonight, voices from behind the wall, and we're dealing with the lack and the denial of medical care that is absolutely outrageous, and folks are dying, behind this type of behavior. And I'll go back to what I said before. This is a culture issue. And I'll tell you what, we're seeing it at an alarming rate and an alarming number of institutions, jails, county jails, prisons, federal, state, you name it. Medical treatment is not something that is taken seriously to inmates, and that may be one of your loved ones. It's someone's loved one behind that wall suffering this injustice, and we definitely will continue to address these issues. We're so happy to be joined by Tasha Osborn. She's founder and CEO of Inmates Lives Matter of Georgia. And Tasha, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to be with us tonight. We really appreciate that.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. And thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. And we intend to partner with you as much as we can. As it takes a village, they say, and it takes people coming together from organizations that have the passion to fight this injustice and what's going on behind prisons and jails in this country. And I believe you share that passion, and we definitely want to be a part of that as well. So you'll always have an ally and a friend here at AJC Radio as we continue to address
these.
Very much. Thank you. You're very welcome. And Cliff, we have a caller, I believe.
Yes, we have LaTanya who has a comment. LaTanya, you're live.
Thank you so very much. First of all, I wanted to tell Tasha Osborn how much we appreciate what she's doing for the inmates. That is so awesome for her to do. I wanted to speak on I've been listening to the show for a while, and it just infuriates me that these prison, behind the wall, they do all kind of things, and then they justify it. But these same actions that they do, they're locking people up for the same exact actions. It makes you just angry. I can't even imagine these families where their children, they're still kids, they're dying in these cells, and they're being left alone. That was a horrible way for Mr. Myers to die. And for you to have to do a double take, that means something stopped you when you walked away to turn back around. You're not going to tell me he sat there and said it was Kool-Aid or punch from coming from a commissary. He knew he was lying before he said it. And this kind of stuff, and when they let these people get off on this stuff, that's why they continue. And to have a policy that says that you check on them after they stop breathing, they're dead. So, and then you're not going to, CPR is not always going to bring somebody back to life. Why have a facility if you're not going to do anything until somebody stops breathing? That doesn't even make common sense.
Right. No, absolutely right.
Thank you for taking my call.
No, thank you. And that's absolutely right. And people should be outraged. They should be outraged. And we appreciate LaTanya for that call. Listen to this real quick, folks. Amanda Hogan was among dozens of suspects arrested 2 years ago as part of a long-running drug sting run by the Carteret County Sheriff's Office. I think I pronounced that right. Carteret County Sheriff's Office, excuse me. Hogan, 28, had a history of opiate abuse, and she took prescription drugs for bipolar and personality disorders. She was also awaiting surgery on her right kidney, which had a stone and had become infected, causing throbbing lower back pain. But the arrest pushed off the surgery, and jailers didn't give her the prescribed medications for her mental illness. Despite jail staff knowing she was a suicide risk, her mother said after going a week without her medications, she used a bed sheet to hang herself in her cell. She later died at the hospital. Her family is now suing the sheriff's office, several jail employees, and the jail's healthcare provider, Southern Health Partners, allegedly deliberate in indifference, reckless disregard, and gross negligence in her daughter's care. The lawsuit is one of several across the state that have alleged inmates died after a lack of access to prescribed medications. So you come into jail for whatever reason. Let me make this point very clear. When I come into county jail, I'm not guilty of anything. That is simply the process to go through the courts. There has been no trial. There's been no conviction. This woman needed prescription medication, and they ignored it. And I know that firsthand from my wrongful conviction. There was a gentleman in there, a Hispanic gentleman, in county jail, in the unit with me. He brought in a inhaler because he suffered from very, very bad asthma. They refused to give this man his inhaler. We could hear him breathing, fighting to breathe, through the cell doors in county jail, the Paso County Jail. That's criminal justice center, folks, in Colorado Springs. And they never would give him. And the guy came out. He was another Hispanic guy. He said, Mr. Banks, I think he's going to die. That's how hard he's fighting throughout the night to breathe. They never gave him his inhaler. Tasha, your thoughts on that? Tasha, you with us?
Again, typical and unfortunate incidents like that are typical, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. It's torture. And like you said, when you're in the county jail, you haven't been convicted, indicted, or you're just there waiting. Right. And I don't know. I just feel I'm still thinking honestly about the individual who died with the punch and who thought it was Kool-Aid in the toilet. That's so absurd to me. Like, they didn't even check to see what it was. They just assumed. So, yeah, again, those instances are very typical and very unfortunate and just way too common. Way too common. And that's why we're here, to keep fighting.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Yes, no, absolutely right, Tasha. And Dennis, go ahead.
I was just thinking, too, I mean, until there's repercussions, until there's, consequences for what these guards are doing and what they're not doing, it's going to continue to happen. I mean, and again, the voice, people speaking out is truly, it's awesome. But again, we always talk about no matter what, when it's time to vote, look for those people that are against recidivists, against, I'm trying to say the word, bringing prisoners going back in and out, sure, recidivism. Yeah. So, we can look for, we need to start voting for those people that are truly about making sure that, it's not tough on crime. Don't get me wrong. We need to be tough on crime, but we need to be compassionate. So I think we're going to have to, get out there and vote, make a difference, get the people in office that can make an effect.
And the problem is they're arresting people. So the argument of tough on crime wouldn't apply here. Exactly. These folks they're in custody.
True.
You're killing these people after they're in custody, which is a nightmare. And to me, I don't care if you're convicted of a crime. If I was
it
doesn't matter. Guess what? The judge didn't sentence me to lethal injection.
That's right.
With my crime. But you have correctional officers, you have deputies that feel a need to give you the death penalty. We told you about the guy in Texas, the prison, no air conditioning in the prison.
144 degrees.
144 degrees. Guess what? Wouldn't even give him a fan off commissary. Wow. He died. You know what he was in prison for? A bad check. A 6-month turnaround. He got the death sentence because of what's going on with the failure to act. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And I believe this. Tasha, I'm going to get your thoughts on this as well.
Okay.
I have a clip I'm getting ready to play regarding a judge. The reason I'm bringing this judge into this conversation, there is a culture in the criminal justice system to not care or help those that are hurting. This particular young lady, I don't want to tell the story. I'm going to play the story for you, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this. This is absolutely outrageous. Let's play it.
Right now, a Broward judge facing scrutiny after video surfaced showing her berating a woman in bond court.
Yeah, that judge has since resigned. But as you can see in that video, the judge seemingly ignoring the inmate's request for medical treatment. Days later, her family says she died at home. Local 10's Madeline Wright is in Fort Lauderdale with more.
This is not at all the type of behavior you'd expect to see from a judge. The defendant's family says they're appalled by the way she was treated when she appeared here at bond court.
Oh, no, she didn't. The family of 59-year-old Sandra Twiggs in shock as they watched video of her court appearance.
He don't say anything beyond what I am asking you. Trust me, I am looking, ma'am. Ma'am.
Twiggs, in a wheelchair, suffered from asthma and COPD. She was charged with a misdemeanor after getting into a fight with her daughter. While in bond court Sunday, Twiggs started coughing.
Ma'am, do you need water? Just nod your head. Ma'am, I'm not here to talk to you about your breathing treatment.
The family says when she got home Monday, she was so upset she could barely speak.
She said they treated me so bad, and she said all I wanted was some medical attention and some help.
The next day, the family found her dead in her room.
It's okay.
Public defender Howard Finkelstein wrote a letter to the chief judge at Broward County Court saying Judge Marilee Ehrlich demonstrated aggressive and tyrannical behavior and revealed her lack of emotional fitness to sit on the bench.
To see a person begging you for help and trying to talk to you, and you treat them like a dog, for what reason?
The family believes the way the judge treated Twiggs and the night she spent in jail might have played a role in her death.
If that judge is listening to us and looking at us, I hope you can sleep at night knowing that you killed her.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time that action happen. We can go on and on. I saw the video. The lady was being respectful, apologized to the judge. I'm sorry, Judge. I'm sorry. For what? And when she began to ask for her breathing treatment, the judge ignored her and told her to shut her mouth. Well, Judge, she did, but she did it permanently. As a result of that type of abuse in a courtroom. And this is what I'm talking about, Tasha. The culture starts from the bench, starts with police. From the time you get handcuffs put on you, the culture that your life simply does not matter starts. And that is unacceptable in every possible way.
You know, in cases like that, you know, to him, she wasn't human. And it just didn't matter, no matter what she said. And then she ended up dying. I know one thing for sure, that these individuals who should be held accountable, families have got to stop being afraid to report, email, show up at events that are held for families. Come in droves, you know, show up in numbers. Like in Georgia, they have a Friends and Family Day. You know, a lot of the families come and they get the chance to say what's on their mind. You can't not go to those events. You have to show up. You have to show up. You have to email. Create your paper trail. Don't just call and email. Always back your calls up with an email and find out who's on top of who's over who's supervisor of this, and get these people and write these names down and create those emails and keep doing it. Keep writing, keep calling, keep emailing, and create your paper trail, because now you have proof. And if you mail anything to anybody, get it certified. Make sure that these people have to sign before they get any of this mail, because these are lives that are being lost. And unfortunately, many more are going to be lost. That's unfortunate. But, there are ways to fight. And a lot of times I think that the family members don't think that there's any way that they can get anyone to listen to them, or, any kind of justice can be served. And maybe not all the time, but you do have a voice and you have to use it. One thing for sure that I do know in Georgia Department of Corrections, they're big and bad. They're tough guys, but no one wants to get told on. And there's ways to tell on them. There's ways to get this stuff in their records. There's ways to get this stuff in their records permanently. You just have to act, and don't think that your voice is worthless. It is. It means everything. But a lot of times individuals don't say anything because they don't think anything is going to happen. And again, a lot of times it doesn't. But you have to keep trying. You have to keep trying. You have to keep trying. Because me, if it's my family member, everybody's going to hear me. Everybody. I'm going to write, email. I'm going to get in front of the building with a bullhorn. I'm going to do what I have to do. But again, right, because a lot of these individuals don't think that they're worth, no one is going to listen to them. They don't think they don't think that what they feel is worth it. And it is. These are your family members, and they're being hurt, they're being abused, they're being tormented. And let's face it, the 13th Amendment says that, you are a slave unless you're a convicted felon. And a lot of these people who are convicted felons don't even know that they're being enslaved, but that's exactly what it is. And the families have got to start opening up their mouths. I don't care. From the minute you get up, get on that email, get these names, get these last names, first names and last names. What are these email addresses? Find out whatever event is going on in your area, associated, not necessarily your area, associated with the DOC that you're affiliated with. Find out get in these groups. They'll tell you, if you get in these support groups, these women are no joke. The mothers, the wives, they're no joke. Get affiliated with them. I'm saying this because I know after this people can hear your show later. I do Blog Talk too, and I know that this is for life. And I want to say this, anybody who's listening, please do not be afraid. Go to these events, get involved in these groups, because you will find a lot of information that you need that you didn't even know existed. Okay, so it's worth it. Lives are being lost, and we can fight. We can fight. There's a lot of ways to fight this. I didn't mean to talk too much. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, Tasha. That's definitely important information. And I would advise our listeners to pay attention to those words, because it does matter. Here's another story, heartbreaking. 6 months ago, 39-year-old Dante Wilson was in a Wisconsin jail for a child support violation. He complained of chest pains, and the jail nurse concluded he had heartburn and gave him 2 Tums. Less than an hour later, Wilson asked for help again. Relax was the nurse's advice. Soon after, Wilson died of a heart attack. The nurse told a detective weeks later, we don't want to drag it out. The expletive happens. The nurse was fired. She worked for Advanced Correctional Healthcare, a company serving 255 correctional facilities in 17 states. Dante Wilson's death was not unique. We found ACH settled at least 6 lawsuits with families whose relatives died from preventable causes. Outrageous. Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just sitting over here. I'm still recalling the clip I saw of Miss Twiggs when it was, like on headline news, and the way the judge spoke to her and belittling her and berating her in the courtroom is ridiculous. And then we have all these people that are just dying senselessly because people truly don't care enough whether you've been convicted or not, because like you duly pointed out, county jail, you're not guilty of anything. But they're being treated like less than human. They're not even afforded the same rights as the average American citizen. Nothing like this. And let me go ahead and preface this, not to downplay any historical events, but they are turning the prison system, this quote unquote justice system, into a modern day Auschwitz. It's what they're doing. They're sending people here and they're dying left and right.
No, absolutely right. And I believe we have a caller that wants to chime in on this conversation. Cliff?
Yes, we have Amber who has a comment. Amber, you're live.
Hi. I was just calling to comment on the not reporting it and the abuse. Me, if I don't report something at my job, I work with elderly people, so if I don't report a medical abuse or just anything in that sort, it's a Class 3 misdemeanor for me. These people are looking down at us because they see us as criminals. But what makes me any less of a criminal for not reporting than you any less of a criminal for not reporting? And, I mean, you get a chuckle out of it, and they do nothing about it. So, I mean, they're no better than the people who they're looking down on. It's ridiculous. And, like the last lady who just spoke, we do need to speak up. I mean, us coming together is power, but so many people are so afraid of what's going to happen and the consequences rather than looking at the reward in the end. I mean, if we all come together like you guys are doing on this show and speak up, maybe we can make a difference. But like I said, for me to get a Class 3 misdemeanor for just not reporting something that I'm suspicious of and nothing happening to them for doing the abuse physically and neglecting these people medically it's ridiculous. It's mind-blowing. I had to call and comment on that because it's not acceptable, and I'm so glad that someone is finally stepping up and doing something about it.
And thank you for that call. We echo that sentiment. We said this before. This is unequal justice in this country. I would like to read a story that says when a nurse tells a man to relax and sends him home or to his cell with 2 Tums because she's too lazy to do the due diligence to make sure this man is not suffering from a heart attack or the symptoms that come prior to a heart attack, you should be medically trained to do that. But says he has heartburn? Yeah, his heart is getting ready to stop. No thanks to you.
And, one of the issues with these situations is that when something does come up and one of these families gratefully, gets some type of closure by being able to bring up a civil suit and, get some monetary damage or something like that from the state jails, from the federal prisons, these cases are typically settled. That they say, okay, we're not going to admit to any wrong, and you're going to kind of give us a little bit of leeway on what happened, and we'll give you a check. But these things, when it happens, and it's something to do with the taxpayer money, it should mandatorily be put out in the public. Yeah, we settled, but so-and-so's brother died. So-and-so's husband died because this happened at the jail. And tell the entire story to the public. Otherwise, all these things just continue to be swept under the rug. Yeah, somebody died because of negligence at a jail or at a federal prison, and that case just disappears. Nobody ever hear about it.
Right.
You have to go and search these things out in the news. Like this thing with Jed Myers. Now, that's not something that you saw on CNN. That's something that, our research team people have to go and search to find these stories because the families have settled. And trust me, I take nothing away from the fact that these state institutions, these private institutions, and these federal institutions owe these families for what they're lost. But it should be mandatory that this information is put out in the public so we all know what happened. Like, sure, you settled with the family. They got a check, but something needs to happen so that this stuff is exposed. Otherwise, the culture becomes that, I can cause the inmate's death, but, the state will settle. It's taxpayers' money. It doesn't come out of these jail employees' pockets. So they're saying, hey, nothing really happened to me, so I get to keep my job. The state settles, and everybody goes on about their merry way. These are the type of things when we say get out and vote, get out and make your voice heard, get out and protest. You have to do it. Otherwise, it these things just continue, and it's a travesty. All the people who are dying behind bars for something as simple as medical attention, and as silly as the nurse on staff saying, "Well, here, take 2 Tums. You must have ate something that was too spicy or something. Take 2 Tums," and a man dies of a heart attack. This is totally insane, and it has to be put to an end. But again, these type of things have to be brought to the public's attention, so that way we can make a knowledgeable decision. If we want to say, okay, we want to vote on taxes. Well, no, we don't want more taxes to go to the jailhouse when you're killing people and then settling with the families. That's not what the jail is supposed to be for. It's supposed to be for reforming a person, for getting them to be rehabilitated in their mind about the things that they're doing if they indeed committed a crime. And then the second part is that if you have somebody that goes to jail, and say there's somebody in county jail, they haven't even been convicted of anything. They haven't even been sentenced. They end up dying, and you're like, okay, I was there for a traffic violation, or I was there because I was accused of something. I got arrested. I'm supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but you have people who are given the death sentence for just showing up in a jailhouse and being kept sometimes, not even overnight. In a few hours, you have people dead from the time they walked in, a healthy individual. That's not acceptable in today's society.
Well, I just want to add something to what Cliff said. The reality is that, and we've learned this from corporate America, they settle, and the reason they settle is because the penalty that they're paying is so much less than the real justice that they deserve. So they basically say, oh, okay, we'll settle out of court with these guys, because basically it's pennies to them. Like you said, Cliff, it's the taxpayers' dollars. So they really see that as not being a penalty. They don't see that as being a punishment. So they're quick to settle, and then they can the settlement, that whole process is something else involved. The court system is involved, and they can appeal, and they can do all these other things. It doesn't mean that they'll necessarily cut a check right then. But the bottom line is this: until they actually have some skin in the game, and like Cliff said, either it's exposure, some other kind of ramifications, a punishment that is deserving of a loss of life, which I don't know what that is, but something significant that makes them reevaluate what's going on. And then when you talk about that nurse, you said lazy. The bottom line is none of these people care. They don't care. And I mean, you have a badge, you have a title, you're sitting there to check a box and say, you know what? This is a licensed facility. They have these many guards and they have this many medical staff. It doesn't mean that they're going to do anything for these people.
No, absolutely right. And I think Tasha's point is to be made. Tasha, it really implored people to get involved, to just press and press and press and do not stop. I think that's critically important that message be driven home tonight, because the system is designed to tire you out and to give up. That's how the system is set up. Well, nobody's listening. Well, I've done this and nobody cares. But I think, as you said, if we continue to press and not grow tired and continue to let our voices be heard, I have no doubt that change would definitely be instituted in these situations. Your thoughts?
You talking about me? You asking me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. You have to. And you know what? For the people in Radio Land listening who hear this, who's listening now and who will hear this later, learn your people's inside people. Learn that counselor's name. Who's your warden? Who's your warden of security? Who's just find out these names and write them down. And copy and write their email addresses down. And don't be afraid of them. These are human beings. They're getting paid. This is their job. And a lot of them are not that smart. So don't be intimidated by them. These names down, record them. Who is the case manager for your son or your daughter? Who is that case manager? And a lot of times there's a turnover rate with wardens and counselors and things of that nature. So what? You know what? You get a new one, find out who the new one is. What's your name? Hi, how are you? I just wanted to introduce myself. Listen, you know what? My son is on your caseload, and I just wanted to say hello And listen, if you need anything or have any questions about him, just let me know and call me. You have to let these people know that you love them, that they have people who love them. Unfortunately, everybody doesn't have family members like that. But if you have someone on the inside, let those people know that there's somebody out here rooting for them and supporting them, because they don't look at them like that. They don't see them. They just see that ID number, that identification number, and that's it. So call in, let yourself be heard, let yourself be known. Hey, how are you? Good morning. Hi, listen, so-and-so is my son, my loved one, my husband. I just wanted to introduce myself. I don't have anything to say, no questions. I just wanted to say hello. I just wanted you to know me. I just wanted to get to know you. Let these people know that you exist because it matters. It definitely matters. You know, everybody doesn't have that, but if they do, just use it. Use your voice.
No, absolutely, Tasha. And you're right about that. Once they find out that there's people out here that care and will blow their phones up, and I don't mean that literally, making phone calls, they get a little uneasy. They get a little nervous because, man, who's calling, you know? And you know, I'll tell you what, they begin to move. When they know somebody's out there that's going to hold them accountable, they get a little uneasy. They may show attitude. You can show as much attitude as you want, but I'm going to let you know that's my brother, that's my father, that's my sister, whatever the case might be. And out of respect for your time, Tasha, I want to thank you for joining us. I do want to give you an opportunity to tell folks how can they get involved with your organization, Inmates Lives Matter. How do we collectively get together? Can you give our listeners how they can contact you if necessary? And again, we're going to and we thank you for spending an hour and a half with us. It's been definitely productive. So put out there.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yes.
Anytime.
Thank you so much.
You're
how can
welcome.
folks contact you and reach out and be a part of this organization as we fight for justice?
Well, let me give you guys my business line. 912-550-4747, area code 912-550-4747. That's my around-the-clock, all-day, everyday phone number. If you have any questions, call me. Or you can email me at inmateslivesmatterga, inmateslivesmatterga@gmail.com, inmateslivesmatter@gmail.com. I am approachable, accessible. I'm just everything. Just whatever you just I'm not one of those people. Just whatever you need, you have a question, just please let me know. I'm also on Facebook, which is like probably more of my addiction than Twitter or any other group. I do have a group, Inmates Lives Matter of Georgia, but it's not of Georgia. That's Inmates Lives Matter Georgia chapter on Facebook. It's the chapter is in there. So if you Google, you look it up, just put the chapter in, it will pop up. And just come in. I have a great group, peaceful. And those ladies and men are on fire for their loved ones. So please just check me out anytime and just let me know. Whatever you need, if you have a problem, an issue, you want us to fight for you, for your individual who is incarcerated, just let me know. And I'm always here 24/7. And thank you for having me on this great show, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you, Tasha, so much. And the feeling is mutual. We look forward to bringing you back because we'll definitely have you back. As the Voices Behind the Wall series will continue, as I said earlier, indefinitely as we become the voice for the voiceless. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll definitely be in touch offline.
You're welcome. You too. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. There you have it, folks. Tasha Osborn, founder, CEO of Inmates Lives Matter of Georgia. I like her spunk, her fire to fight for these folks, and she's talking. We're definitely going to go out there and Facebook, look for Inmates Lives Matter, Georgia chapter, as she stated. Let's get involved. She seems to have the passion that advocates should have to make a difference. Sampson, your thoughts on this guest and what she provided to this show?
Hey, absolutely. I mean, she came at the, she's noticed a problem, and she provided not only a solution, but a tangible way for everybody else to get involved too. I mean, she's not just talking about, hey, let's tear down the justice system and rebuild something else. No, she's talking about, hey, look, these people need a voice. These people need advocates. We need to get out there. We need to make their voices heard. We need to speak up for them. We need to, attack this problem with all forms that we can, be it social media, be it email, be it telephone calls, be it protests, and, peaceful protests, but just so that people know that, just because you're behind a wall and you think you have some position of authority, you're not going to get us to shut up. You're not going to get us to be quiet, and you're not going to, we're not going to let their voices be silenced until something happens to help those that are behind the wall.
Absolutely right. And folks, right now we're going to take a quick break, come back with a couple of more clips and another horrific story. Voices behind the wall, medical care causing the deaths of many, the lack of medical care, rather, in our prisons and jails, causing deaths around this nation. This is AJC Radio, Voices from Behind the Wall. We'll be right back.
I don't have to tell you about the challenges we face every day. That would be like preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Today you have a chance to face the challenge of your risk for diabetes. My dad had diabetes, and 1 in 4 U.S. adults are at risk, myself included. If you're older than 45 or African American, that risk increases. So here's a chance to ask yourself, what can I do? Talk to your doctor about getting screened and know what your options are. Learn more at AskScreenKnow.com.
When does it stop being partly cloudy and start being partly sunny? Why is the word abbreviation so long? Are English muffins just muffins in England? Why is it called a washing line and not a drying line? Do fish get thirsty? If ghosts can walk through doors, why don't they fall through floors? Do you yawn when you sleep? If prunes are dried plums, how do they make prune juice? Why do doctors leave the room when you change? They're going to see you naked anyway. Do board chefs wear hairnets? How much deeper would the ocean be if all the sponges were taken out? Do you believe someone who says they're a chronic liar? Why is sandwich bread square and sandwich meat round? Life's full of hard questions. Ask one more. You might just save a life.
There's a lot of mud when it rains here, and it makes it really hard to find food. There are car bombs every day. My mom worries about me when I go out. Every time I hear the alarm bell go off from school, I think it's an air raid. Sometimes I have nightmares about it. A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close. My dad says we have to leave, which makes me scared. I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us. What if they don't understand our religion? Because we don't speak the language, it might be hard for them to make friends. But I know it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words. These are not my words. These are not my words.
You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round.
Shane Carson walked into a Spokane County jail sometime after 10:30 a.m. on June 13th. Less than 10 hours later, a corrections officer was dragging him out of the cell by his ankles, says Trevor Primo. Carson's cellmate ankles, says Trevor Primo. His face was purple. His forehead was cut between his eyebrows. His cellmate watched as correction officers and medical staff tried and failed to revive Carson, 31, now one of 7 people to die in the facility in the past 14 months. The Spokane County Sheriff's Office does not oversee the jail, but is investigating Carson's death and has thus far released few details. Detective Lyle Johnston says he is waiting on the results of a toxicology report. There's been an issue with the state crime lab, Johnston said. Years ago, we got results within 4 to 8 weeks, and now it seems to take like we're waiting months. A news release indicated in June that the detective is investigating a potential assault, but Johnson says he has no evidence to support that initial suspicion. In a recent jailhouse interview, Primo denies that he assaulted Carson and describes a man in the midst of a drug withdrawal. Primo, who acknowledges using drugs in the past, says Carson would wake up in fits, shaking. He was drenched in sweat and his skin was very pale. Primo says he called correction officers to the cell door at least 2 times. Each time the cop came by and he was like, oh, he's just detoxing. He's just detoxing. It's normal, Primo says. Later in that evening, Carson starts hyperventilating, quick breaths in and out, which Primo demonstrates during an interview at the jail. At the time, he calls the correction officers again. I'm like, the dude's not doing good. Can I get into a different room or something if you're not going to come in here and check this dude out and make sure he's okay? Again, absolutely inexcusable. So the guard makes the statement, well, he's just detoxing. That's all he's doing. But he's hyperventilating. He's struggling to breathe. And that's your answer. Don't worry about it. He's just detoxing.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely just appalling. Like every time that we hear about one of these stories about a death of one of these inmates or even a detainee in county jail, there's always some lame excuse that is given by the people that are supposed to be caring for these individuals. I mean, oh, he's detoxing. Oh, that's just, fruit punch in the toilet bowl or this or that. There's every reason they can give except to act like a decent human being. Yes, there's somebody that may or may not have done something wrong that's in the cell, but that doesn't mean you sit there and neglect them to the point that they die. I mean, here we are, case after case after case of people being mistreated by this injustice system and dying as a result. For some of them, for what? Was it a child support check? They got called back? A child support check, really? I mean, come on. There are people that are incarcerated in far worse situations for far worse crimes, and they're still alive today. People on death row, they're still alive today, but somebody in county lockup is going to die over something small because somebody didn't want to do their job.
Well, no, go ahead, Sebs.
No, I'm just saying it's ridiculous. That's all.
No, absolutely right. This is outrageous, folks. And you can sit back and listen and say, man, this is really a shame. But what are you going to do about it? How many phone calls are you going to make? How many marches do you want to call to protest this injustice? How many prisons do we need to walk around? How many county jails do we need to picket and say this is not going to be tolerated in my community? It's something that needs to be looked at. We got a clip for you. We'll talk on the other side of this clip.
The family of a 23-year-old Flowery Branch man who suffered 2 seizures while in the care of the Gwinnett County Jail disputes the official finding that his death was unavoidable.
Chris Howard went into cardiac arrest back in February, hours after being admitted to the jail. Fox 5 I-Team reporter Randy Travis reviewed surveillance video, which raises some questions about how deputies handled Howard's situation.
Your residents today, some of this may be difficult for some people to watch. Howard suffered from a rare disease called MCAD, which requires eating on a regular basis to avoid death from low blood sugar levels. Well, jail video confirms he was fed shortly after arriving, but it also reveals something else, a nearly 1-hour delay in getting to the medical unit, despite the insistence of medical staff.
I just know that my son was healthy, and there's absolutely no way he should have went into this jail and not made it out alive.
Robert Howard figured Chris had survived the danger zone of a disease that had already claimed the life of his first son when he was just 5. Chris grew up to be athletic, popular, tall and lanky with chiseled good looks, a man constantly on the move. The only legal mistakes of his 23 years would turn out to be a drunk driving arrest on New Year's Day and a positive marijuana test on February 15th that landed him in the Gwinnett County Jail, a place from which he'd never regained consciousness.
How often did Chris have to eat to make sure he didn't get sick?
Well, we never even, MCAD never even became an issue. We never even talked about it after the time that they were 13, 14 years old.
MCAD can leave someone with dangerously low blood sugar levels if they don't eat regularly. All of the Howard children have MCAD. Howard says his son did not have a chance to eat lunch the day he failed his drug test at the probation office, but he says Chris had missed meals before as an adult with no issues.
How much do you think MCAD had to do with his death?
I don't think it had anything at all to do with it.
He thinks the answer can be found on jail surveillance video. That's Chris sitting in jail admissions the afternoon he was brought in, chatting with others while eating a sandwich. Jailers knew about his condition. A few hours later, he's on the phone in a holding cell when suddenly he suffers a seizure and drops to the floor. Deputies and nurses quickly arrive, members of the jail's rapid response unit holding Howard down while he begins suffering a second seizure. As he starts to recover, the doctor on call orders Howard taken upstairs to the jail infirmary, quote, immediately. Nurses later told jail internal affairs investigators they made the same request.
I told them I don't want anything to happen to this man down here, so take him upstairs.
Deputies placed Howard in a transport chair and cuffed him. According to their reports, he was calm, smiling, and asked for some water. But instead of rushing him to medical, deputies decide to put him on the floor in cell 13 for observation, a direct conflict of the medical staff's instructions.
Unfortunately, we have some of the seizures around here, and it's kind of like, I related it to the story of the boy that cried wolf.
Chris Howard would spend the next 30 minutes rolling around cell 13, crying for help, unable to sit up, clearly weak, repeatedly trying to knock on the door to get someone's attention. Occasionally, a deputy would peer through the window, then move on.
I saw him in the window of cell 13. He looked very pale, and to me, I remember thinking he looked like death.
I figured this is something that the nurses knew about, and we'll just keep an eye on it.
So he's sort of forgotten about for at least 30 minutes.
It's one thing we've been looking for is answers. It's been killing us for 8 months. Just, it makes me mad. Makes me sad that he had to go that way.
Eventually, a nurse finds him and insists again he be taken to medical. But for a second time, there is little urgency.
They finally say, okay, yes, let's get him up to the infirmary. And they take 12 minutes to go change his clothes so they can put a jail uniform on him first.
Why? Why would you do that? Why would anybody do that?
Now officially dressed, deputies wheel him toward the medical unit called JJ. But Howard's legs keep falling off the chair.
And that moment we didn't run with him, but we kind of speeds up our pace getting to JJ. And that's when the nurse was like, he doesn't look well.
50 minutes after he was supposed to be taken to medical, Howard had gone into cardiac arrest. Members of the rapid response team would work frantically to try to bring him back, but by the time he was taken to Gwinnett Medical, doctors determined the damage to his brain was irreversible. He was officially declared dead the following day.
At the time Chris Howard was having his seizures here, his blood sugar turned out to be a normal 93. Could he have died from some cause other than MCAD? Could the delay in getting him medical care have somehow contributed to his death? Well, the medical examiner who conducted the autopsy says the answer to both those questions is most likely no.
Dr. Michelle Stauffenberg ruled Howard's death a result of a complication of a genetic disease, MCAD. She wrote, his death had already begun before he arrived at the jail because of the missed meal. As for the 50-minute delay in getting him to the infirmary, she told the Fox 5i team, I don't know one way or the other. I would tend to believe it would not have had an effect. The process was already in motion.
Considering his condition, are you certain that this 50-minute delay would have made a difference and he'd be alive today?
I think it would make a difference with anybody. Chris was 23, very healthy guy, and I just don't think MCAD had anything to do with this.
Well, the internal affairs case was officially closed last week. All jail personnel cleared of any wrongdoing. There's a new policy in place, though. Whenever someone from the medical staff says, take an inmate to the medical unit, they are to go immediately, even if they're not in a jail uniform. Makes sense, huh?
That definitely makes sense. And in medical emergencies, we're always taught that every second counts.
Right. Exactly. I mean, even if he had MedCAD or MCAD, and we don't know that was the case, 50 minutes would seem to make a big difference. I don't get where the doctor would say that wasn't a factor.
She just thinks that it had already started beforehand. But she also leaves herself a little bit of wiggle room. In the report, she also says it could be that he died from some other unknown cause. So she's not saying it's 100% MCAD. The family sure wishes that he had a chance, though, that 50-minute delay to perhaps get him somewhere else where a cardiac arrest could have been handled by someone of, more medical training than just some deputies pushing him down the hallway in a wheelchair.
I'm sure they'd appreciate some definitive answers as well.
Yeah.
Randy, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Randy.
That is the most horrific story, and we have many. 50 minutes, almost an hour. Medical said, get him up here now. I'm lost for words here. How do you justify? Who are you to say that this young man was dying before he ever got to the jail? He was sitting down eating a sandwich and smiling in custody. But you want to come back and say, well, the death had already started. So guess what, folks? If you're having a heart attack, no need to call 911 because he's dead anyway before we get there. Are you kidding me? Ridiculous. And as usual, as Tasha pointed out, this is typical. No one charged, cleared of any wrongdoing, as body bags continue to increase in number. It's unacceptable, folks. When do we get tired enough of this nonsense? And the nurse, the doctor, whoever she is, making an excuse, you're lying is what you're doing. Don't worry about the family, the pain in that father's voice. 23 years old, dead for no reason. Because they failed to do their job. You can call it whatever you want to call it. You can wiggle room, as the reporter said, well, she gave herself a little wiggle. You don't have any. You're a killer. That's what you are. Until we call it what it is, we're never going to change anything. Call it what it is. How poor health care turned Walter Jordan's prison sentence into a death sentence. Walter Jordan tried to tell the world he was dying in prison in Arizona when he mailed a handwritten message titled Notice of Impending Death to the federal court in Phoenix. 9 days later, he was dead. According to Dr. Todd Wilcox, a physician who reviewed Jordan's case, the 67-year-old might have survived if he had received competent treatment by the Arizona Department of Corrections and its private, for-profit healthcare contractor Corazon Health. Jordan died of invasive squamous cell skin cancer that ate through his skull and invaded his brain. Dr. Wilcox identified multiple deficiencies in Jordan's care, concluding that his death was unfortunate and horrific, and that he had suffered excruciating, needless pain in the final months of his life. Jordan himself testified to his own impending death in his letter. ADOC and Corazon delayed treating my cancer, he wrote. Now, because of their sick delay, I may be lucky to be alive for 30 days. Jordan died in prison, but his words have reached us, and they are a call to action against poor prison conditions that lead to pain and death for prisoners who have a right to proper care from the institutions charged with their custody. How sick is that?
To me, it's absolutely gut-wrenching because reading over some of the articles here, like Corazon is just one of the institutions that does healthcare for some of the prison systems and county lockups, and we're talking billion-dollar contracts billion-dollar contracts to provide adequate health care to these men and women that are behind bars, and you're telling me that they can't get prescription medication, they can't even get seen for obviously having something wrong with them until they're in a county lockup or prison uniform. And not only this, now we have to have a policy. We have to have a policy made to tell you, to define what immediately means when when a medical professional tells you get up there right now.
Well, if you've been cleared of all wrongdoing, why are you changing policy? Why do I feel the need to change policy immediately if we're cleared of any wrongdoing? It means we're doing our job. Doesn't make sense, does it?
Not at all. It's one thing after another. Like you said, they're stacking body bags left and right of these people, and giving themselves way too much wiggle room, and nobody's holding them accountable. I mean, like you said, how many places do we have to stand in front of and picket and boycott and call and do whatever we got to do to get this story out there so that people know the true injustice that is going on behind those walls?
No, absolutely right, Samson. Final clip of the night. We're going to play that. We're going to close out. Let's play it.
I actually watched a good friend of mine that was not a life-term inmate who had a definite date to get out, turn green, and die in his bunk.
Prison healthcare in the U.S. is broken. After serving their time, prisoners will almost certainly be sicker upon their release, if they even make it that long. Joseph Calderon was in prison for 17 years.
While serving time in the security housing unit, I had chest pain one night, 7 sharp pains that woke me up out of a dead sleep.
Joe wasn't able to see a doctor the night of his chest pain. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that he finally got to see one. Joe says the doctor told him he just had a muscle cramp and sent him back to the cell with Benadryl. While prisoners are the only Americans who are constitutionally guaranteed to have health care, they often have to fight to see doctors and get medicine. Okay, so why is prisoner health care so bad? When it comes to political power, prisoners rank pretty much at the bottom. In certain states, they can't even vote. And prisoners rank at the bottom of the social ladder, too. American society generally views people in prisons and jails as deserving of whatever mistreatment they get. There just isn't the political will to make prisons and jails more humane. And state and city governments are under tremendous pressure to make the cost of incarceration as low as possible. Low pay at facilities tends to attract less qualified doctors. Much of the medical care is outsourced to private contractors, who often rely heavily on unlicensed medical assistants instead of doctors. And it can take months to even see a doctor. One of those contractors, Southern Health Partners, only requires its doctors to spend 6 hours a week visiting jails. And one doctor may be responsible for thousands of inmates.
We see cases every day of the most horrific abuse and neglect of desperately sick people. A prisoner told to take Tums for what turned out to be cancer. Nurses failing to deliver medications and falsifying records to show that they did. We had one case where a nurse wrote in the patient's chart that he had his vital signs were normal and he was in no apparent distress, despite the fact that the prisoner had actually died 10 hours earlier.
If they're lucky enough to get actual medical advice, prisoners might not be able to afford following it. They're still charged for copays and prescriptions. Their jobs in prison pay just pennies an hour.
The average pay scale is about 18 cents an hour, so $5 for your medications can start to add up.
Prisons and jails are designed to break people down. It's all but impossible to get meaningful care in a prison setting that is inherently detrimental to a person's physical and mental health. And stressful conditions, lack of exercise, and a diet full of salt, sugar, and carbohydrates don't do much to help sick inmates heal.
It's not unusual to see people who look 15, 20 years older than their chronological age.
So what do you think? It seems the real question isn't should prisoners get adequate health care, but how badly are we as a society willing to treat people in American prisons and jails?
Well, there you have it. Folks, we didn't scratch the surface tonight, but yet it is enough information tonight that is heart-wrenching as Samson talks about the emotions, the unbelievable, folks. I want to invite you to go out to change.org, look for the petition, Voices from Behind the Wall. Sign that petition today, won't you? To get involved, that change might come as a result of the voices crying out for the voiceless. In your community, wherever you might be, get involved. Pop up at the county jail and say, I need to know that my loved one is safe. Because I'll tell you right now, folks, if tonight is any indication of the abuse behind the wall for failure to give medical treatment to inmates, we've heard story after story. And to the families of those that have lost their loved ones, our condolences, our thoughts, and our prayers for the injustice that you have suffered. AJC Radio continues. Voices from behind the wall, the abuse, the horror, and the terror that continues across this nation. We'll see you next time. This is AJC Radio. Good night, America.
Prisoners have been denied medical care in Arizona, and they've been told to pray instead. Think Progress has a story about this. And it's now been a year since a lawsuit was filed by the ACLU alleging that there has been grave medical neglect of prisoners in Arizona's private prison healthcare providers, and prisoners have continued to die or endure unnecessary suffering after not receiving sometimes the most basic medical treatment. After asking for medical assistance, as I read earlier, many prisoners are told to, quote, be patient or, quote, pray, according to a new report from the American Friends Service Committee. It found that there was lack of timely emergency treatment, denials of care, failure to provide medication and medical devices, and under the Eighth Amendment, prison officials are required to provide medical treatment to prisoners. Prisoners are legally able to request that their care be consistent and that their services are accessible. Proper medication must be dispensed. Dietary restrictions must be accounted for. This year, the ACLU's lawsuit, as a result of the incredible number of cases that corroborate this, has been granted class action status, which now it means it applies to everyone in Arizona. I don't know, Louis, whether this is specifically a private prison problem. The state has the sixth highest incarceration rate, and as we know from recent interviews, including with Todd Clear, private prisons only represent a pretty small number of the total inmate population of this country. But to say that whether it's state or federal prisons, we don't need federal oversight when these things are going on, there are cancer patients who simply did not receive treatment, period, full stop, and died.
Yep, and I would assume that this is mostly a problem in private prisons, but who knows? I'm very curious to see what happens with this, and it's pretty shocking that this has been going on for so long.
It is, and we're going to continue following the story. As you know, we've been covering issues relating to the prison industry, incarceration, the war on drugs, and private prisons for years. We're going to continue covering it, absolutely.